lot of stuff happens that the news won't tell you.
All of it began the first time some of you who know better and are old enough to know better let young people think that they had the right to choose the laws they would obey as long as they were doing it in the name of social protest.
We had a leak, a serious national security situation.
We are now in the process of defeating the radical left, the Marxists, the anarchists, the agitators, the looters, and people who, in many instances, have absolutely no clue what they are doing.
The Anarchist Leak, and this is the Leakly News.
Hello everyone, it's the Anarchist Leak, and yes, I also think I need hair on this balaclava. So, what is capitalism? Defined by someone who hates it. Capitalism is the private ownership of land resources and or production. This means one person or small group owning lots of land, oil fields, factories, premises, basically any place where they can extract wealth from. Now, there historically has always been opposition to this. People who didn't want to work 12 hours in a mine, or pussies as I call them. Or people who said, my family always lived on this land, you can't claim you own it because some people I've never met signed a document. Or those niggling little voices that say you can't just raise the rent and evict me. Or those dangerous voices that say the owner of the factory makes millions while doing none of the work, and the people who do the work and make him the money only get subsistence wages. So if we formed a union, we could improve our lot. These are dangerous people and should never be trusted. So, what does the capitalist do? The capitalist does what the capitalists have always done. They go to the government. But, I hear you say, I heard that communism is when the government does stuff, and true capitalism is when there's no government. Oh, you sweet little idiot. Phrases like this are what happens after a generation have been raised on memes and spent more time with their phone than their friends. See, capitalism without a government has never happened, and that's why, arguments from these people are always very convenient. If there is a failure of capitalism, they say, oh, that's government intervention, or that's cronyism, or it's colonialism, whereas all these things are necessary for capitalism to happen. It's basically the same thing that flat earthers do, that once they hear another argument for, the earth being round as it is, they just make up something. As in a fantasy, you can really make up anything and pass it off as reality. But the true reality is, though, that capitalism has always, from its very inception, required three things: a government, a military, and debt. The Bank of England was formed by the government and the king in the wake of the English losing the 9 Years' War against the French in the 1690s, and the embarrassment of losing a war against the French made them realise they need a better navy. So what they did was assemble a group of the largest moneylenders in the country to loan £1.2 million to the government for them to build up that navy. This loan was given at an 8% interest rate, and crucially, while the government did pay back the interest rates year on year, the debt itself wasn't repaid until 1994, over 300 years after, and yet if I miss my repayments by a week, the bank won't let me hear the end of it. But then you say, did that not just leave the bank with a massive debt? Yes, it did. So what they did was they sold that debt in forms of bonds and stocks to other rich people, because that's what a stock in its very basic manner is, the debt of a company bought in small amounts. And because of this, the bank were allowed to do something that no company before was ever allowed to do. They could print money. So these creditors who joined together to loan the government 1.2 million, which would be the equivalent of billions today, lost basically all their money from this. But the government then allowed them to print money, so it didn't matter that they lost wealth. They became above wealth. They became wealth itself. It didn't matter that they lost money when they could print it. And for the government, they could better fund a navy. This led to the vast size increase of the East India Company. This company then went on to start British colonialism and all the abuses that came with that. The East India Company had an army just shy of 300,000 men, more than the size of the British Army itself. And the debts that this company incurred were paid for by the stockholder. But as the East India Company's business model was basically steal what you can and sell it to whoever, investors did make money out of this. So you may be saying, what's wrong here? Bankers took a risk and got reward, government got themselves some spices and a better army and more land, investors made money, but I left out one very important number, 1.8. 1.8 billion. That is the number of Indians who died due to the wars and famines that the East India Company and subsequent British colonialism implemented upon them, all to extract Indian resources for British benefit. Okay, so you may be saying that's just one bad example though, isn't it? No, because the Dutch East India Company is basically the same story. Governments set up a bank to create a corporation which takes land that doesn't belong to them to extract resources, killing millions in the process. And these are the first two corporations and central banks to have existed. apart from one in Sweden that was also a company set up by a king and a bank to extract resources but out of a Swedish mine. Same exact story, but it just wasn't as interesting. But you may be saying that's all in the past and doesn't happen anymore, except it does. Companies in Europe and America in particular extract resources out of places like Africa, Asia, South and Central America. These companies pay little to no tax in the places they extract the resources from because they are registered in a different company. And they also keep processing plants, places to turn crude oil into petrol or diesel, for example, away from these countries to keep the production away from them and to keep them poor. And if these poorer countries decide to get rid of these companies who exploit them so they can use their own natural resources for their own benefit, a strange natural occurrence happens, and that's called a war. There's 5 examples of that. Iran in the early 70s, Congo in the 60s, Burkina Faso in 1987, Libya 2011, Bolivia 2020. In reality, for capitalism to work, it needs 4 things: government, military, debt and colonialism. And that's why I hate capitalism, and that's what capitalism is. So join me next time where I explain another political thing. This has been the Anarchist Leak. Like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, shout to a neighbour that I made a new video. I don't care what you do. If you want to support, there's a Patreon and a Ko-Fi link down there somewhere. Yeah, and enjoy your day. Have a good one.
Notes from a society that's about to crumble into dust. As the rich rob the poor from their ivory tower, people worry about their future while their present turns to rust. Trained soldiers murder civilians as they cower. Those who talk about truth sow mistrust. As the future looks dour, it's now up to us. Get feet on the street as we near our final hour. Their irrational decisions will destroy the planet. To those who view life as worth less than the markets, to all systems of greed and power, you are now legitimate targets.